Hello, and welcome to the Millets Webinar for July 2025, where we will be considering today the processing of sorghum as food. My name is Don Osborn. I'm one of the co-founders of the North American Millets Alliance, a nonprofit initiative founded in 2022 to promote millets, broadly defined, as sustainable crops and as nutritious foods. The U.S. is the world's largest producer of grain sorghum, but most of that is exported. Some is used for animal feed or for biofuels, and very little is consumed domestically as food. How to change that? That's a dialogue that's happening right now, especially in the wake of perturbations in the export market. So today we'll be discussing the so-called missing middle of the food ag chain, as far as a key element we don't often think about getting something like grain sorghum from the farm to our plates, and the processing of sorghum and what that means for what we might do now. Together with my NAMA colleagues Joni Kindwall-Moore and Gary Wheatgriffe, we wish to welcome Earl Roemer, the president and founder of NuLife Market, who will present, followed by Joni, who will offer some comments, and we'll have discussion and questions and answer as we usually do. Earl Roemer is a fourth-generation agricultural producer and businessman from West Central Kansas, with backgrounds in both animal and plant science. Earl has held state and national leadership roles for both the state of Kansas and the National Sorghum Industry organizations. Earl is the founder and president of NuLife Market. This company focuses on the production, milling, and processing of specific sorghum grains containing defined quality, and chemistry characteristics for applications in the food and beverage industries. So welcome, Earl, and you can fill out your bio as you wish and begin your presentation.
I really appreciate that, Don, and thank you for the introduction. And I also appreciate the opportunity to tell the NuLife Market story and to give a little bit of background after 15 years in terms of the advancement of grain sorghum into the food industry.
Welcome. So you have a presentation to...
I do, yes. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And
all right, that'll be good.
Get started.
Can you enlarge that? There we go, Earl. Good.
Yeah, I think everything is working, at least on my side.
Yep, looks good. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to tell the story about grain sorghum as an ancient grain for sustainable food, feed, and beverages. Also talk a little bit about the parallel between grain sorghum and millet and their production regions. To begin with, I'm located in West Central Kansas. You see the little star there. We're right in the center of the grain sorghum production region in the United States. Kansas produces 57% plus now of all the grain sorghum produced in the United States, which equates on a commercial basis to around 200 million bushels annually. You know, we talk about grain sorghum being an ancient grain. Well, it definitely is. Sorghum grain was discovered in clay pots, dated 8,000 years ago. And in those clay pots, the Nabta Playa region was where that archaeological dig occurred. And from there, we can obviously see some of those areas that are very important to grain sorghum as a staple food supply. And you can see Mali is really important over on the west side of North Africa. Ethiopia, very diverse region, and grain sorghum is tremendously important in that region, but it gives a little bit of a history. Those kernels of sorghum grain found in those clay pots look exactly like those grain sorghum kernels that are produced today. And how is grain sorghum utilized in the U.S.? The primary use of grain sorghum is on the export market. That's where those markets have to be. We have to move a lot of grain out of the United States to other markets throughout that world. and 55% of grain sorghum is exported. You see the food products up there at about 3%, 2% for pet food. Now that's increased to 5% and over 4% for the pet food industry. So you get an idea in terms of the growth. And that growth has created a lot of opportunity for our company in the food industry. We brand ourselves as rooted in sustainability. That's been tremendously important for our company. Traceability, controlling of the production management practices that the grains are produced in. And in Western Kansas, our farms tend to be very large. And the reason for that is because of environment. Grain sorghum is a risk management grain because we do not receive consistently enough rainfall to produce corn, other corn belt type of crops such as soybeans. And so we produce grain sorghum as that risk management tool. One of the most important aspects of Western Kansas is the Ogallala Aquifer. The Ogallala Aquifer is a huge lake, and you see that depicted, but it's a non-renewable source of water. We irrigate out of that, but we do not have that Ogallala Aquifer, that big lake, renewing itself in terms of the volume of the water being pumped out of it. Grain sorghum survived and evolved in these harshest regions of the world. And because of that, it developed these unique protective mechanisms that allowed that grain to survive. Millet is produced in a lot of those same regions as well. And they are both grains that are highly sustainable. They are not as prone to drought and have both protective mechanisms that developed that allowed that grain to survive in drought conditions.
Are you?
Yes. And we produce our grains under a regenerative production management system. NuLife Market controls the supply chain. From the time that seed is planted and the specific genetics of those seeds that are planted in those specific regions. And we depend on a regenerative agriculture production system to both conserve the water within that soil, but also to maintain that microbial biodiversity in that soil. What is very ironic about this same system, because we utilize a wheat sorghum fallow rotation. We also utilize no-till, which is maintaining that residue on top of the ground, which creates this beautiful cover that not only prevents transpiration of that soil moisture, but it also sequesters that carbon and maintains that carbon into the soil. We were the first company in the United States to be able to offer a third-party verified negative net carbon utilizing our production management practices. That has also allowed our company to grow. And why do people purchase NuLife grain sorghum? And it is because of these unique characteristics that are in demand by consumers in the US. First, it was gluten-free. When we started the company, gluten-free was definitely the buzzword. And that was the late 1990s. So it has definitely grown from there. But a few years later, all at once, gluten-free was not the top characteristic of the grain sorghum flours that we sell. It became GMO-free. And GMO-free has been a great advantage as well. It is the policy of the grain sorghum industry to not be genetically modified. And that turned out to be a great decision because of those demographics of individuals that would like to eat both gluten-free and GMO-free. And grain sorghum, it conserves our natural resources. It's a very sustainable grain produced under a regenerative agriculture production system that we control. It's an ancient grain, has health beneficial grain chemistry. You can see the massive diversity in terms of those sorghum grains and as far as colors. Depending upon where that sorghum survived and evolved, it developed these unique phenolic compounds that allowed that grain to survive. An example would be the black sorghum that was sourced from the high elevation regions of Ethiopia. Very unique characteristic. Because of those elevations and because of the UV exposure to that grain, it developed that unique characteristic. You see the red sorghum. That red sorghum, this one specifically, contains proanthocyanidins. And that one was discovered in the plains of Sudan originally. And then you see the white sorghums. Sorghum species is sorghum bicolor, two colors, tan plant and purple plant. The white tan plant sorghums that evolved primarily in those areas in Ethiopia and Mali. The local indigenous tribes, they hand selected those sorghums for their flatbreads and porridges. And so that was the plant breeding that went on that developed these unique bland flavored sorghums. And we identity preserve those sorghum grains by planting those seeds that contain those characteristics to grow the grains that are in demand by our customers. Our company is also GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, Food Safety Audited Program. We're at the highest level of food safety, FSSC 22,000, which allows us to conduct business domestically and internationally with the largest food companies. And it produces excellent food and beverage products. We could not have a business if we did not have consumer demand. And that consumer demand is growing because of the excellent products that are available. Some of the consumer trends recently, obviously, we talked a little bit about the GMO-free, the allergen-free, but trading down to premium is one that may not be as familiar to individuals. Trading down to premium means a customer is willing to purchase a product for more that contains the characteristics that they demand. So they produce less of a product for more money, as long as it contains characteristics that are important to them. Environmentally responsible foods have become very important. Traceability, food safety, extremely important. And customers want to know where and how their foods are grown. And obviously now, foods that support health and wellness has also allowed our company to expand. And you see that in the diversity of the color, also the antioxidants and phenolic compounds that sorghum contain. One of the reasons that our company has become so successful is because we solved problems in the gluten-free industry early on. And grain sorghum already contains some really nice milling characteristics, but we developed milling processes that controls particle size distribution, starch damage. We also are able to plant and identify specific sorghums that contain the correct starch profile analysis, primarily associated with that ratio of amylose and amylopectin in that grain. So grain chemistry is important. The grain physical characteristics are important. The grain nutritional profile is also important. We control every aspect of that grain in our milling processes and the analysis that's conducted with that grain. And we provide custom particle size specifications. We work directly with the major CPG companies who are our customers. Our business model is bulk ingredient supply of these specific grains that have been developed in terms of the milling particle size distribution for an application. And you see the broad spectrum of that. We produce both different colors of grain sorghums. We mill at all different specifications, from ultra fine to only polished grain for food applications. These are some of those applications. Ready-to-eat cereals have been very popular. Extruded snacks has been the fastest growing category, and that began during COVID, when people were sitting at home more and eating more snack foods. So that's actually benefited us, and we could track that in terms of the volume of sales for the milled products utilized for extruded snacks. Field crisp, pretzels, baked goods of all kinds, granola, cookies, crackers, bars, pasta, tortillas, and instant quick frozen products are all very popular. One of the highest growth areas recently has been those Master and Me sorghum dog treats. We have extrusion process within our plant, and we produce food products that are nutritionally nice for the dog and also very nice for the human, and produced in a high-level food safety company like ourselves. These are some of our certifications: NuLife Market, FSSC 22000. We're project verified non-GMO. We're gluten-free, certified, Circle U, certified kosher, USDA certified organic under a specific program. CCOF is the one that guides and certifies that program. Behind every idea, there could be a great opportunity. We've been very fortunate. When I started the company, I milled all the grain sorghum. We sold very little. We had a great customer, a major CPG that wanted to offer grain sorghum food products as a ready-to-eat cereal. We were very fortunate to have that strategic partnership that helped our company to expand. 15 years ago, there was 2, maybe 3 products on grocery store shelves. Now there's over 1,000. And we went from milling a few hundred pounds of grain sorghum flour annually to milling a few million pounds of grain sorghum flour annually. And we're expecting a growth over the next 18 months to be over 40% because of that expanded demand by customers, by consumers for products that contain the characteristics that grain sorghum has. We also export sorghum, and that's been very important for us. Some of the challenges in terms of export cost of containers has reduced that volume, but we still see international demand for these sorghum products because globally, consumers demand these characteristics that grain sorghum contains. Nutritional characteristics, non-GMO, and gluten-free are important globally as well. Some of the things we do, and we have a partner that's really benefited on the commodity side, where we support small container sales to potential international customers. And then on the commodity side, Westcan Grain, who has massively expanded their presence in Western Kansas to be able to deliver those products in bulk to those customers. So we look at that as a potential to increase export markets with a great partner and with state-of-the-art facilities. The facility there, the brand new facility you see in the train loadout, it's one of the fastest unit train loading facilities in the United States. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, everyone, and welcome some questions.
Earl, this is Gary Whitgriff, and I'm going to be moderator. My background is I've been around millets, especially proso, for 40-some years, but I'm very, very curious to delve into some of the specifics of especially the products that you offer. You didn't go too much into detail on that, but let's start out, if I may. You're expecting large growth. Obviously, that is probably from traditional customers, but for the topic here today, tell me, are you willing to take on new customers that may be, say, a fairly large processor that wants various, whether they be extruded or grain pearled sorghum? Are you willing to take on those new customers?
We can and we do, and we have. So that answers that. Our primary customer base are the largest CPG, the largest food companies here in the United States. And you can name them: Kellogg's, General Mills, PepsiCo. You see those products out there now that contain sorghum in that ingredient deck. And those are the companies that are driving growth because of consumer demand for those retail products they offer. They love what we do because of the traceability and the volume and our ability from a food science standpoint to be able to support their product development. We have 3 food scientists on our staff, highly acclaimed, highly experienced, that support product development with those customers.
Oh, this is fantastic. I've been around identity preserved seeds for a long time because obviously if you're in a seed company, you better have it identity preserved or you don't have a product to sell. So that brings in with the volumes that you're covering or the diverse types of sorghums that you're working with. Uh, you must have very integrated system to be able to, and storage system to keep those separate. Do a lot of that stored on the farm, or do you bring it all in at harvest? How does that work?
No, all of it, or I would say 90% of all the grains are stored on farm under our production management system that is highly documented. We have very tight control of every aspect of that grain production on those farms. And most of the farms, because the farm size in Western Kansas can be very, very large and are. We have on farm storage of individual producers up to 1 million bushels. And so that is a very large capability. And we're very diverse in terms of the region to minimize risk and production. And we manage all of that from north central Kansas down throughout Western Kansas, down into the panhandle of Texas. We've evolved into this. It didn't happen overnight.
Oh, that's for
We had
sure.
growth in consumer demand, and we developed a program of strict identity preservation and documentation that also benefits that traceability of that grain to that consumer.
That's fantastic. And if I should say, if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to incorporate them into the discussion. But you touched on in your presentation the various products, but you probably have a dozen different types of products from bran, popped grains, flour, meal, Nutri-EZ, Ultralight. I mean, please go into those products, where your major ones are and why.
You know, I can go into some of the milled flours and some of the consumer demand. I touched a little bit on the extruded products. You know, you see the expanded snack foods, the cheese curl-like products, and it's been very important to understand that we're a replacement to rice and corn. We're a major replacement on the rice side, on the toddler and the baby foods. That's been very important because we can mimic and even improve upon those products that are already out there. But with our tight control of our traceability program, the major companies like that. And that's why they've evolved and expanded their utilization of grain sorghum for these products. But we do it all, and we have multiple milling processes, very tight specifications on the particle size distribution for an application. Another one that's been very high in the growth for us is a cut grain, where we're breaking the grain into about 4 to 5 different places. And the large growth is primarily in ethnic markets. So on the East Coast, you have the Caribbean population, you know, that are living in Florida. In that region, the Southeast, high volumes of population that are used to eating grain sorghum. And then you also have the African population and high volumes in the Northeast. That's also increased that. I think what would surprise most people is the tremendous volume that we are selling of these products. And we're selling them in the hundreds of thousands of pounds on a monthly basis into those markets.
Well, that's what's so encouraging, is because although I've been involved, and all of us have been involved in the millet business one way or another, whether it's been from research or gone living in foreign countries or whatever, but to see a product like sorghum, and I have to say it's more than a product, because you're using various sorghums to blend. You're not just taking a standard variety and milling it, but you're taking a whole diverse segment. We had a question come in. Let's, if you may answer that first. You mentioned specific organic specifications for USDA. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're USDA certified and we're audited under the CCOF program. And the CCOF program is a guideline for the processing facility like us, where we're offering both non-organic and organic, but we have a special clean out process and flushing process within that program that allows us to offer under CCOF certification, certified organic products. And all of those grains coming to us also have to fall underneath a USDA audited program that is organic.
Right, which obviously tracks all the way back to the farm and several years before they actually sell you grains, so that it is organic, it is certified. So that's great. Now I'm not exactly sure how many types of sorghum you handle, but you do have a product which I was curious in. It's pearled sorghum.
Yes.
And obviously a lot of people are familiar with pearled millet, or excuse me, pearl barley, but there's also a pearl millet, which it could be very confusing, but it seems like to me that pearl millet, especially the short season Canadian food varieties, would work perfect in Western Kansas, especially in your market. But I was wondering if you are looking at bringing on other millet products in general, like obviously proso is grown in Western Kansas, not too far from you. Pearl millet certainly is grown for feed, but could be grown for grain down there. So are you looking at expanding into more products, more millet products?
Yeah, whatever we have customer demand for, as long as it falls within our food safety program and they could become an approved supplier. Food safety risk is huge for us because we treat our milled flours, our sorghum flours, like medicine because it's an allergen-free food product. Absolutely. But getting back to the pearl and the pearl millet, yes, we've grown pearl millet on our farm before, and primarily as a forage application. But when I refer to pearled sorghum, I refer to a process. That's a polishing process that controls that volume of insoluble fiber versus starch. We have full laboratory capability. We're able to measure that within our lab as a quality control tool.
Well, I didn't mean to confuse maybe some of the listeners, but a month or two ago, we had a presentation of pearl millet that's up on YouTube from Canada and food grade pearl millet. Now, I've never paralleled pearl millet with pearling process. And so you could potentially grow in Western Kansas in Scott City area, pearling pearl millet for food in the same channels as you would because pearl millet is different than other millets in that the way I understand it, the seed coat is attached, just like sorghum, where proso, for example, has a loose hull and that hull is then dehulled or hulled. So so yes, you are willing to bring on other products. That's exciting, and you obviously have growers trained to do that. Now, I'm an agronomist, and I was specifically curious about your rotations. Can you get into the rotations and why you have a certain rotation there?
For us in Western Kansas, because we have minimal rainfall, our average rainfall will be, 15 up to 20 inches annually. Over the last 3 years, we've had a tremendous drought, which, in that respect, has been in some areas under 10 inches. But in our rotation, our production management practice system, we plant a lot of hard red winter wheat in our area. And in that rotation, it's a wheat sorghum fallow rotation to build up subsoil moisture. So we're about ready to harvest our hard red winter wheat crop right now. And then those fields post-harvest will lay idle, and all of that post-harvest residue will stay on top of the ground. And in terms of production management, that will be burned down, that will be sprayed prior to fall to prevent any of the volunteer wheat from taking moisture or any of the weeds taking moisture. Then that land will also lay idle during the winter. And then the following spring, like right now, we're planting our sorghum crop into that heavy residue in a no-till planting system. And then it'll be harvested in the fall, in October.
I've been involved since the mid-'80s in regenerative agriculture, no-till systems up here in South Dakota. Basically, we converted the whole winter wheat area up here into a regenerative system of direct planting. And so I think that's fantastic. And the moisture that you're saving, but also the labor and the fuel. And also, people don't realize, but leaving that trash on top, you prevent a lot of the weeds once they don't emerge from the germination zone. And that, I would say, is very key to your business, is trying to keep weeds out of it, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's a big part of it. But also on the other side, we have to talk a little bit about food safety associated with that. You
Yes.
know, glyphosate, negative press associated with that can also be a negative factor. What we've found, and we do test for all of those chemicals and even some of those not mentioned, and we have not found those residues within our grains. And it's been a huge advantage of having all of that residue on top of the ground to reduce the volume of chemical used on that ground. You know, that was a big part of when the data was collected for us to be able to offer a product that has a negative net carbon associated with that. That is that regenerative production management system. It protects and maintains our soil moisture and reduces and sequesters that carbon into the soil, which prevents the expulsion of that carbon into the air. Great production management practice.
Well, along with that, because of the low humidity, low moisture, you also have low diseases. It goes hand in hand. And so obviously you have a testing procedure for diseases, also fungi, for example.
Yes, 100%. Because we're doing business with the largest companies in the US, they're going to have very, very strict requirements in terms of analysis because of liability risk. And I know I want to touch, because I did see a question come up in terms of the food scientists. We
Yes.
have 3 food scientists on our staff, and they're very, very experienced in industry. Our business development director spent 10 years as a product developer or lead product developer for Post Cereal, baking science degree from Kansas State. And these are sales staff. And so we're able to directly and support problem solving when it comes to the development of new products. There's very little that we do not know about our products and how they can be transformed into food products. And that's how we've been able to grow, is that technical expertise that our company has.
Well, Earl, I tell you what, I am very, very impressed. I did some research, and you're from Scott City, you know, a town and say 4,000 people in Western Kansas. I mean, to bring on to the world, especially, you know, large supplies of sorghum to the U.S. processors, I think is fantastic. And then tracing it all the way back to the farm and presenting to the companies that further process besides what products you offer. So I'm gonna, this missing middle piece, let's bring in Joni, and she's a board member of the North American Millets Alliance, and her experience with foods. And I think she's gonna give an interaction with you that is a
Gary?
different take. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Don.
and Joni, pardon me, excuse me. I did notice a question that it kind of almost on the same vein that Earl was talking about
Oh,
from
maybe I missed it.
Jessica.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Did you see the question from Jessica? Basically about, would this type of support, this research support, be available to companies that you sell to?
Oh,
I
You see
can answer
Jessica's
that
question
because
there?
I have been that CPG company.
Please go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, my company, Snacktivist, actually has worked with the R&D staff at NuLife Market on new and novel product development in the past. And we mostly worked with Karen Watson, who is no longer a part of NuLife, but the other team members have been fantastic. And honestly, I have to say it was in my 10 years of having a CPG and product development company, I think the best experiences I've ever had with working with development teams was at NuLife Market. So good job, NuLife Market.
Thank you
So,
very much, Joni.
yeah.
Absolutely, that makes me very proud too, to hear that. And that's been one of the most rewarding aspects of NuLife Market, is that phenomenal professional team that I've been able to assemble.
Yeah.
Because we would not be successful without that great team. It
Yeah.
begins with the growers themselves, because they have to be very professional to manage the system that we put in place. But then when that grain arrives here, we have to have a professional staff here to execute And from the milling and the food science side, food safety, tremendously important. Another food scientist leads our food safety team here.
It's really incredible because there aren't very many times that you get to interface with like deep product development expertise in that way. And so because you guys are almost like vertically integrated from germplasm to like that entry into the market, it's a really rare opportunity for innovators like brands or institutional food service, et cetera, to have access to a team like that. It's not the kind of thing that we usually get to afford to have in-house ourselves. So I'll give everyone who's listening, because I'm assuming most of you may know me, since I think this is maybe the fourth or fifth time I've given a little conversation on one of our NAMA presentations since we founded it. But I actually will give a very brief presentation just to show some pictures of the kind of things we work on using grains, sorghum grain, like what Earl and his team work on. So my company, Snacktivist, really hinges around a lot of the same philosophical principles as NuLife Market, where sorghum is such a critical crop in regenerative landscapes. And so our whole mantra at Snacktivist as a food innovation company is regen for the next gen, and how we can drive product innovation and category adoption for crops that support a regenerative agricultural landscape for future generations. I've got two screens. Sorry, I'm looking away. So basically, Snacktivist takes climate smart crops that usually we are brought to usually we work with agronomists and we work with farmers, and we do a product design model where we model our work around the needs of the farming rotations. Keith Mortar is one of our farmers in the Snacktivist Nation program. He has been piloting sorghum trials out here in our neck of the woods because I'm based in Idaho. So our agronomic setting is Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and sometimes a little bit into Montana. And there's a huge demand from farmers out in our area to do exactly what Earl was describing before, closing that gap between the winter wheat and those crops, and when we have a dry fallow period. And in the inland Northwest, during that dry fallow period, which is the summer, things get tilled, we blow away and wash away the equivalent of about 50 Toyota Corollas a year per 5-acre parcel, which is a New York City block. It's actually our largest export in the inland Northwest is our topsoil. So crops that are warm season grasses like sorghum and millets provide a potential alternative that radically impacts our agricultural sector while producing high quality human and animal food. Unlike Kansas and in the Midwest, we have very immature infrastructure in the Northwest for processing any C4 crop. We're making some advancements. There is a proso millet dehuller that is just going live in Montana. We also are developing more relationships with local co-ops and post-harvest handling processors in the Northwest that can handle these crops. But, at the end of the day, the quote here from Keith is kind of my motivator every morning in a lot of the work we do. He has seen with integrating these new crops like sorghum, he's actually breaking a lot of this chemical dependency that is endemic in our region. And because, like Earl also mentioned before, sorghum not only produces a high quality grain and a lot of biomass, it actually produces incredible root exudates. And in our neck of the woods, unlike a lot of parts of Kansas, we're very low precipitation and we have a dominant dryland ag landscape. Keith here farms in 6 to 8 inches of precipitation a year. And he finds when he plants sorghum as a rotation in his wheat dominated cropping system, he gets a boost in productivity of about 20 to 25% in both yield and test weight in wheat following a sorghum rotation. So that's why we've taken on to really innovate around these climate smart crops. We use this regenerative by design innovation protocol where we do use a seed to plate methodology. We're stringent on germplasm. We want to know that the genetics of the sorghum really are the appropriate type for culinary application because it makes a really big difference. So we do work with breeding programs that have taken some of that early novel like Texas A&M germplasm from overseas, and really bringing it into zone-specific application. We have a lot colder nights, and so we have a different agronomic environment than, say, Kansas and in the Midwest. And we also don't have the humidity. We also are very keen on data connected supply chains like Earl. I actually was at Expo West and got to spend a lot of time with the NuLife Market team, including the farmers. I believe it was 2021 when the CO2 connected supply chains were launched. Earl, I may be off on the year,
Yeah,
but
that's correct.
yeah, I actually got to spend a lot of time at the booth and actually say, hey, if you buy our product here, like these are the types of projects that this is what sorghum can do. And in that way, that was a really fun partnership because when you're introducing a grain that people aren't familiar with, it's really nice to see what it can actually do in a familiar food setting. And so that's really where Snacktivist does most of its focus is on product innovation and market development of, consumer friendly products. Like everyone knows how to eat bread. Why not integrate sorghum into bread? Everyone knows what to do with a cookie. Why not have sorghum in a cookie? So we actually play a role, more of like a consulting. We do buy, sell, and brokerage of different commodities as well. But my favorite and where my heart is in innovation. And you can, historically, you've been able to buy our flour blends and baking mixes coast to coast and even into the UK. We've actually pivoted into a different part of our business model, which is lacking, but you can still purchase our products in food service settings coast to coast, not so much retail anymore. We are really fascinated and keyed into institutional market partners. When COVID hit in 2020, we pivoted to a retail focused CPG model. We have now actually pivoted back to our B2B ingredients and institutional partners model, which has actually it was difficult, but it's been a very rewarding experience. These are, when you think about what K-12 and campus and institutional represents, it's the largest food service opportunity in the country. And so they are making commitments. I know NuLife and USDA Sorghum Checkoff and a lot of people involved in sorghum were really critical in getting the school lunch programs to accept sorghum as an accepted whole grain for school lunch programs across the country. So there's a lot of work to do to get sorghum on those plates. The way that we're driving innovation, is medically tailored meals. That's not so much K-12, but especially in more adult settings, hospital, institutional. How do we use something like a grain sorghum in place of rice, knowing that it has a lower glycemic index? Compared to rice, it has a much higher nutritional profile, much more beneficial fiber profile. And when you're trying to care for people in the hospital and you need to get them to discharge, caring for things that fiber and lower glycemic index is like a huge win. So we do a lot of product recipe development and product innovation for those types of environments. We also have done a lot of baking innovation. We have a line of sorghum-based pizza crusts and sandwich breads, as well as cookies, crackers, and more. More on medically tailored meals. And I don't have any pictures of it, but one of my favorite product lines that we developed recently that really does play into that medically tailored meal world is a line of grain bowls. It's a grab and go breakfast product that is served chilled, and it's almost like a rice pudding, but it's actually built around sorghum, proso millet, and oats. And so it's a beautiful alternative to a breakfast parfait or even yogurt. If you're looking for something for a change of pace, served right alongside yogurt. We piloted that in the Bay Area 2 years ago with great success. I'm still looking for a commercialization partner to advance that product line into the market for mass distribution. Really, really incredible product with a great nutritional profile and making sorghum the star of the show, which is super great. Also on deck for us this winter, we received a grant to develop and advance our pasta product line. Our pasta product line actually is a hybridized line where it does include wheat. It's a wheat, sorghum, proso millet, garbanzo bean flour blend, making a pasta line for K-12 campus dining and other institutional settings. We'll be releasing that product into the market going into 2026. Again, for those of you who missed Lanier's presentation and USDA sorghum, this is a fantastic graphic if you're trying to explain to the market why sorghum is truly a incredible powerhouse superfood. I'm happy to share this with anybody. Just ping me, I'll send you the image. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but let's go back to Q&A. I just wanted to share a little bit about what Snacktivist does, since we navigate the missing middle, really narrowly focused on, when that crop leaves the system, like the farming system, who are our partners that can get that processed, and where are the innovation hubs to make sorghum something that people are like, oh, I want to innovate with this, but I don't know how. How do we solve that problem of unlocking the culinary potential of sorghum, but other millets as well?
Well, thank you, Joni, because we at North American Millets Alliance, as you know, obviously being a long time board member, is our goal is to explore all millets, which we consider sorghum one of the large millets, but in the same general family of millets worldwide. And so between what Earl has done, what you have done, we want to show as North American Millets Alliance what's available out there for products. And we are willing to work with any millets in any actually any country bringing in millets. We've talked fonio and other ones, finger millets, etc. But I did want to bring up, there was a question that come in. I should have caught it under your presentation, Earl, but greetings from Vietnam National Plant Genebank. And so each of you talked just briefly about accessing varieties of sorghum that aren't currently available here. Joni, could you detail that a little bit? And then I want to have Earl explain it.
Yeah, so there's really interesting genetic development happening globally for sorghum. And one of the things that I find most valuable and intriguing about sorghum is the complexity of its genetics. Like when you go down to a sorghum breeding facility, I haven't been over to yours, Earl. I would love to, but going to like Richardson Seeds in Vega, Texas, the variety and the breadth of expression, like phenotypic expression that you can get from sorghum is absolutely mind-boggling. And when you look at how sorghum adapts very quickly to whatever those epigenetic signals are, you put it into a cooler climate, it suddenly rapidly adapts within just a few generations to express different traits depending on where it is. I feel like it is one of the most underutilized and underappreciated crops in the world. And for that reason, we like to build community with people from other parts of the world that are not only saving seeds that have some more of those deep held secrets about what genetics are out there for sorghum, but also taking it and evolving it in new and novel settings. So
well,
Earl
Joni,
can add to that too.
yeah, Joni, you touched on something that I think Earl is already or his scientists are working on, and that is you blended different grains in to make a product, and each sorghum variety, each specific thing that Earl does, it seems to me, might have a little bit different, I'll call it benefit into one of those blends. And so some of the products that Earl has, he's accessed because of the characteristics. You want to cover that, Earl?
Oh, yeah, sure can. And absolutely. Number one, grain diversity is also hugely important. So that's why we've worked as an ancient grain with the millet products in our plant, as long as they're underneath our food safety program. Getting back to the genetics and trait.
Yes.
I help guide public and private plant breeding programs and those plant breeders specific to traits. And that's where the challenge becomes, and that's the focus. So we focus those agronomic and grain quality, grain chemistry traits with a food application to bring focus into those plant breeding programs, which has been a challenge in the food industry. And so we're communicating those traits that are necessary for a food application. And we also support with our lab analysis as well in the selection of those specific lines that are expressing those traits that we have interest in.
Good. And in the comments, I just see, I know obviously it's completely different hour when we're looking clear across the world. So I appreciate the gene bank in Vietnam, and they've also posted some more research to support both what you said and Joni. And there obviously is other gene banks out there. One thing that I was not aware of until I did research into your company is that there's waxy millets like Waxy proso, which is very, very unique in that millets have more access to germplasm than, for example, waxy corns or waxy rice. So you have a waxy sorghum. Touch on that a bit.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, the diversity in the genetics of grain sorghum and the focus of that is specific starch characteristics. And so for food applications, think sugar smacks, think grain that can be puffed and be very light and very airy. And so our waxy sorghums are over 95% amylopectin starch. So that creates that beautiful puffed product. On the other side of that, it has a great benefit on the beverage side as a fermentation grain because the amylopectin starches convert that starch to glucose faster.
Touch a bit on beverages of sorghum in your supply.
Well, the number one in the world is the baijiu utilization in China, and has been and was a pretty nice market for us until some of the container costs got too high for that market. But I've given presentations in China for the baijiu market there, and they're ancient sorghums that are produced in China and way back in the 1500s in the Ming dynasties. Those sorghums are waxy. And that is a very unique characteristic that they find valuable. And one of the reasons why in the US we focused on that waxy trait and discovered specific lines that contained that trait and found it economically feasible or important from a commercial standpoint to develop waxy sorghums because of that reason into hybrids.
Well, in the US, I don't know of many sorghum. Well, there's alcoholic drinks, for example. There's a brand of sorghum beer, but do you see that? What needs to occur in order to get more sorghum drinks in the US? What angle do you think this market needs to take?
Funding. There's a fantastic one in Canada called Rain-Fed Foods that's a blend of millets with sorghum is one of the dominant ingredients, and fantastic product. We did a lot of R&D on it. We've enjoyed it, and it's literally not being commercialized because of lack of catalytic capital in the markets to like get things into the CPG or, you know, commercialized setting. There's just been a funding deficit entirely for anybody who's, you know, not over like $10 to $20 million a year revenue. So all of these early innovators have been forced to either sell IP into existing companies that can fund it or just go underground. So I know for Snacktivist, that's why we stopped doing a lot of our commercialization work, which is frustrating.
Yeah, Earl, do you supply or would you supply small breweries that would be interested in sorghum beers or that market?
We did in the gluten-free market prior to COVID. You know, we had a lot of those microbreweries that were springing up because of that increased demand for gluten-free food products. So in our test kitchen and laboratory, we actually produce a lot of gluten-free beer here. But most of those companies, they couldn't sustain COVID and went bankrupt. And so we were able to develop a lot of great products for that market. And there is still gluten-free beers out there. The other side of that is the syrup market. And that's the grain converted syrup, which is only an amylase conversion of that starch to glucose.
Okay. One thing that North American Millets Alliance has done this year was, beginning of the year, we introduced proso grain grading standards so that there's a uniform standard across the U.S. for buying, purchasing, segregating on the farm. And so how do you work with growers? And this is, I think, very important from the grower standpoint. How do you and Joni work with growers to make sure that their product that they're harvesting is food quality available?
For us, we have a very strict program, a well-documented program, and a well-communicated program in terms of our strict requirements as far as quality. And so we inspect fields, we're in direct communication prior to harvest, and we only take USDA #1 sorghum. And so we have a tremendous amount of inspection prior to delivery into our plant. And we know prior to harvest and even during harvest, the quality of those grains that are going to be delivered to our plant. And it's well communicated under that documented program.
Well, the great thing about sorghum is that it has been, well, primarily because of milo, we think of as a livestock or an export feed. That's what we call it up here, grain sorghum. Up here, we call it milo. But there is USDA standards, so there are standards for sorghum where there hasn't been a USDA adopted proso millet or any other millets standard, whether it be pearl, foxtail, finger, or whatever. And so that's why we released the standard for proso being number one, because the old number one was actually 54 pounds, which is fine for birdseed, but it's not fine for a product like you want to use. And so by stating to the farmers, if you're going to get into a number one food market, you better segregate as number one.
Yeah. And have the right handling and, like the safe handling practices, especially if you're integrating sorghum into a wheat rotation, but it's going into a segregated gluten-free, allergen-free channel. There's really a lot of TLC that has to happen, a lot of education with not just the farmers, but the harvesting staff, and we've had a couple instances where that wasn't articulated quite well enough. And unfortunately, those loads of sorghum failed to pass our gluten-free standards and they weren't able to come into our value chain. So like the work that Earl's done to educate the production side about best practices and handling and quality has really helped advance the industry for sorghum.
Absolutely. And you mentioned pet food, but also, the little processing that I've done, you always have products that don't make quality standards and you have to move those out. I would assume both of you move to not a pet food, but a livestock market. Is that where your byproducts go, Earl, that just don't make standards and say you have extra brand or something like that?
Yes. And, we're very fortunate to be in the middle of one of the largest beef cattle feeding industry areas in the United States. So it's not hard for us to send our byproducts into the feeding industry, either swine or beef feeding program.
Well, I think that's key because, for example, if somebody wanted to, we'll say Michigan, wanted to use your products, rather than shipping supplies of sorghum that you've identified up to Michigan, seems to me that Joni and Earl, these new buyers would be much better off coming to you for the processing and to get some value out of that, I'll call it byproduct, in a market. Is that your recommendations?
Yeah, that'd be very possible. But for us, we send grains out that have already been cleaned and ready to be milled as well as part of the product line that we sell. And that makes it much easier for the customer because of the high investment that it takes, the very large investment that it takes to be able to have that type of equipment in place.
Oh, absolutely. I was in the seed business, and we're talking multi-million-dollar with the volumes you're talking about to get the quality grain going out the door, and obviously the inspection of the trucks and everything else before it's even loaded. So obviously key. Joni, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, it's interesting when you look at that regionality, because here in the Northwest, we do have sorghum that is of the grade where it should go into animal markets, but because they're not super familiar with sorghum as a crop, there's just reluctancy because they just don't know a lot about it. And in that way, I've been able to team up some of our cattlemen with like Lanier and the veterinary support kind of education side of USDA Checkoff. But what I've realized is they actually need more education to know, oh, this is an okay thing to feed my animals. In poultry, we don't get that, but like definitely in livestock, there's a little bit of hesitation because they're just not familiar with it. And they read about prussic acid and then they're kind of scared and all of those things. So, we do have still a significant education that needs to happen out here to drive that adoption curve.
Yeah, Don just posted that we do have a YouTube presentation on proso millet standards, and they are available. Sorghum standards are available through USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. So, Joni, want to take a short, brief minute here to wrap up, and then I'll ask Earl to do the same thing. What do you want to pass on to those listening and future users of sorghum?
Yeah, so to those listening, I'm just always encouraging people to make those requests known to whether it's a brand, whether it's a food service opportunity or institutional opportunity. Like if the population starts demanding diverse grains and diversified staples like sorghum, that's how we get that de-risking of commitment from these larger purchasers to take that leap and invest in things like sorghum. And we already, like Earl mentioned, we have fantastic infrastructure, really. We have incredible IQF processing partners. We make beautiful IQF sorghum, but getting the final mile, getting that adoption curve, people are scared. What if they don't like this? This is new. What if they don't know what to do with it? Wonder if they're scared. We need the early adopters out there creating that signal, that bottom-up pressure that lets these influential purchasers know that there is an appetite for something new. And we're tired of the same old 5 commodities. It's time to diversify. That's how we impact our health, and that's how we impact our soil.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Joni. And from the standpoint of the sorghum checkoff, having growers go to their checkoff and say, we want more products on the market, and that's a key. So, Earl, you want to wrap up with your recommendations?
Oh, absolutely. And Joni brought up a big point because the consumer drives their ability to purchase a product that has a characteristic that they want to consume. And that's been our success. It's those characteristics of sorghum that has increased consumer demand. And sometimes I take for granted what we have in the state of Kansas as far as Kansas State University in terms of investment in research. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that university and all the dollars that they're investing that helps support the sorghum industry and the sorghum producers in the state of Kansas. We were recognized last year as being the agribusiness of the year in the state of Kansas, and even received a governor's award in which we've been able to accomplish. But it takes a team. And it takes a team, it takes the farmers, it takes the processors, it takes our employees to be able to execute and make this business a success, because no business can be successful without a great team of employees.
Oh, I tell you what, a fantastic wrap up, Earl. We're going to close this, and this presentation will be, of course, available on YouTube channels. So recommend it to all of those, whether it be growers, your suppliers, your buyers, that review this, because I think you covered, as did Joni, very important information of how you track a product, and specifically different types of sorghums all the way through to the consumer. And I really, really appreciate you not only developing the sorghum line, but being willing, and Joni also sharing your expertise publicly so that others can have access to sorghum and sorghum products as part of the whole millet portfolio. So on behalf of North American Millets Alliance, I thank you, Earl, for jumping in, and please continue to follow us.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Earl. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Don,
Thanks,
Gary,
everybody.
Joni. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.